Hello, baby. Tonight, let me take you on a very special journey, a magical tale from a world long, long ago. It's a story about creatures so big and so gentle, so mighty and so mysterious that they once roamed the earth before any of us were here. This is the story of the dinosaurs, how they came to be, how they lived, and how one day they disappeared, leaving only their whispers behind in the rocks and stars. So snuggle in, close your eyes, and let the dream begin. A long, long time ago, before there were cities or stories or even people to listen, the earth was quiet. The oceans shimmered under pale moons, the skies swirled with colors no one had ever named, and the land lay still, cradled in sleep. There were no footsteps, no music, only the slow sigh of wind curling through canyons and across wide, empty plains. But even in that deep silence, something magical was beginning. Far beneath the earth's surface, deep below rivers that hadn't yet formed, and mountains that were only whispers in the stone, life began to stir. It started not with a roar, but with a pulse, gentle and slow, thump, thump, thump. The world was waking up like a baby stretching after a long nap. And then, one morning, a morning without clocks or alarms or birds singing, light shimmered on a soft patch of ground beside a still, clear lake. The air was warm and sweet, the kind of warm that makes you want to curl up and smile. And there, nestled in a bed of fern-like leaves, lay a strange, speckled egg. Crack! A tiny sound. So tiny it could have been mistaken for the snap of a twig. But it wasn't. Crack! Crack! The egg wobbled. It jumped. It shivered. And then pop! A piece of shell broke away, revealing a nose, then an eye, then the head of a creature no one had ever seen before. He was small, barely the size of a melon, with soft green skin and wide, curious eyes that blinked at the sunlight like it was the very first light in the world. His name was Nino. Nino took one step, then another. His legs were wobbly like jelly, and he plopped down into a soft patch of moss with a surprised little squeak. But he was smiling, because even though he didn't know anything yet, not what the sky was or why the water sparkled, he felt it in his tiny, beating heart. This world was made just for him. He wasn't alone for long. All around him, other eggs were hatching. Big ones, small ones, round ones, striped ones. From each egg came a different kind of dinosaur. Some had horns like twisted tree branches, others had feathers that shimmered like raindrops, and a few had tails so long they curled around themselves like sleepy snakes. The world had begun to bloom. Mountains yawned and lifted their stony heads toward the sky. Rivers giggled as they carved new paths through soft soil. Trees, not like the trees we know, but great, ferny, feathered things, unfolded their leaves and stretched toward the sun. Nino explored it all. He met a tiny flying creature who zipped through the air like a kite on the breeze. Her name was Luma. She had wings made of gossamer light and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. She landed on Nino's head and chirped a song just for him. "Where are we?" Nino asked. Luma tilted her head. "We're in the beginning." The beginning of what? Everything. Together, they wandered through valleys lined with soft moss. They splashed in puddles that glowed in the moonlight. They watched as the sky turned colors, rosy pink, golden orange, then velvet blue. Nino thought the sky might be singing to them, too. As night fell, the stars came out, not in handfuls, but in rivers. They poured across the sky like spilled sugar. Nino and Luma lay on their backs, watching them dance. "Do you think we came from up there?" Nino whispered. Luma blinked. "Maybe we fell from a star. Or maybe we grew from a dream," Nino said. And in that moment, the world seemed to hush, as if listening. The days passed gently. The world was young and full of softness. Even the roars of the larger dinosaurs sounded like lullabies. Nino grew stronger. His legs carried him faster. His eyes sparkled brighter. He could run across the soft hills and leap over tiny streams, always with Luma soaring just ahead. Sometimes they met other creatures, huge, lumbering ones with skin like stone, or tiny, squeaky ones that raced like lightning. Each one had its own song, its own way of moving, its own secret to share. Nino listened carefully. The trees told stories with the way they swayed. The rivers hummed songs of things yet to come. Even the rocks whispered if you pressed your ear to them. "I love this place," Nino said one morning, his mouth full of sweet berries. "Me too," said Luma. "It feels like we belong." But far, far away, deep beyond the mountains, the wind had begun to carry a different kind of song. Not bad, not loud, just different, like a new note in a lullaby. It came on the breeze, wrapped in the scent of change. Nino didn't notice it yet. He was busy chasing the shadows of clouds across the grass, laughing as Luma swooped and twirled above him. The world was still bright. The sky was still kind. And every night, when the stars came out, they held hands, Nino's tiny claw and Luma's feathery wing, and watched the galaxies spin like dreams. They had no idea what lay ahead, only that they were here. And that was enough. The morning mist was gentle, curling through the trees like silk. It wrapped around the ferns and puddled in the hollows of the hills. The sun was slow to rise, casting a sleepy golden light across the quiet valley where Nino had spent the night. He opened his eyes and stretched, his tail unfurling like a ribbon behind him. A soft chirp greeted him from above. Luma hovered in the air, her wings fluttering silently. "You snore like a thundercloud," she teased, twirling in the breeze. "I do not." Nino laughed, rubbing his eyes with his tiny claws. "I was dreaming of something." "What kind of something?" "I don't know," Nino said, "but it felt big, really big." They started their day with a short walk to the berry bush they had discovered the day before. The berries were plump and sweet, and Nino loved the way they popped between his teeth. As he munched, Luma darted through the leaves, catching drops of dew on her tongue. The forest around them was alive in a way Nino hadn't noticed before. Every tree had a rhythm, every patch of grass a soft hum. The world wasn't just waking up, it was singing. After breakfast, they followed a narrow trail lined with curling vines and tiny, curious insects. The ground was soft beneath their feet, and the air smelled like rain, though no clouds were in sight. Nino paused every few steps to poke at something new. A beetle with glowing spots, a mushroom that released a puff of blue mist, a rock shaped like a sleeping face. "What do you think this is?" he asked, holding up a shiny stone. Luma landed on his snout. "A piece of the moon," she said with a wink. "Or maybe a dinosaur's tear." "Dinos don't cry," Nino said, but his voice held a question. "Don't they?" Luma said gently. "Maybe not yet." They walked on. As they reached the edge of a tall cliff that overlooked a sweeping valley, Nino stopped. Below them, the land stretched out like a painting. Rolling hills, golden plains, and a silver river winding like a ribbon through the heart of the world. Dinosaurs of all shapes and sizes moved through the landscape, some in groups, some alone. The ground trembled slightly beneath the weight of their steps, but it was not scary. It felt like a drumbeat, steady and strong. "Do you think they're all like us?" Nino asked. "Do they wonder where we came from?" "Maybe," Luma said. "Maybe they're looking for answers too." A gentle breeze rose from the valley, carrying scents of flowers, fresh grass, and something else. Something colder. Nino shivered, but not from the wind. It was a feeling he didn't have a name for yet, something that pressed gently against his heart, like a question that didn't want to be asked. "I feel," he began. "I know," Luma said. "I feel it too." They sat in silence for a while, watching the clouds drift across the sky. One looked like a long-necked dinosaur dancing. Another looked like a giant egg cracking open. The last one looked like a falling star. As they turned to head back, a new sound reached them. Faint, distant, like the call of something old and slow. Nino froze. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. "Yes," Luma said, perching on his shoulder. "It came from the north." They didn't go back to the berry bush. Instead, they followed the sound. The forest grew denser, the light dimmer. The trees were taller here, with thick bark and leaves the size of Nino's whole body. The air was cool and still, like the inside of a cave. Shadows moved even when the wind did not. Nino stepped carefully, Luma fluttering close. Then they saw it. In a small clearing stood an old dinosaur, older than any they had ever seen. His skin was faded, a patchwork of grays and browns. His eyes were deep and slow, like lakes that had forgotten how to ripple. He stood still, but not asleep. He was listening. Nino didn't want to speak, but somehow his voice came out. "Hello." The old dinosaur turned his head. He smiled, and the wrinkles in his face folded like paper. "Hello, little one." Nino stepped forward. "We heard your call." "It wasn't a call," the old one said. "It was a memory." "A memory?" Luma asked. "Yes," he said, "of a time before me. Before us, before even the eggs." Nino sat down. "Can you tell us the story?" The old dinosaur nodded very slowly. "There was once a time," he began, "when the earth was only water and fire. No trees, no sky. Just darkness and light chasing each other in circles. Then the land rose and the skies cleared and the first seeds were planted by the stars." By the stars? Luma echoed. Yes, he said. They watched the earth spin, and when it was ready, they sent their whispers down. From those whispers, life began. Nino listened with wide eyes. We dinosaurs, the old one continued, are the earth's first songs. We came from warmth, from soil, from dreaming stone. We walk so the world remembers how to move. We breathe so it remembers to grow. But nothing lasts forever, not even the first songs. Nino felt the question rising in him again, that strange, quiet question. What happens when the songs end? He asked. The old dinosaur smiled. Then new ones begin. They sat together in the stillness, surrounded by ancient trees and golden leaves. The wind shifted slightly, carrying with it a single note, high and soft. A beginning or an ending, it was hard to tell. But Nino didn't feel afraid. He felt full. Not of answers, but of wonder. And sometimes wonder is enough. They thanked the old one and walked back slowly, their steps quiet, their hearts open. That night, Nino dreamed again. He dreamed of stars falling into oceans, of trees growing from laughter, of giant wings folding around the world like a lullaby. And somewhere, in the middle of it all, was a song just beginning. The next day dawned with a sky brushed in lavender and silver. The light crept gently through the trees, scattering dew like tiny stars across every leaf. Nino woke slowly, the dream still clinging to his thoughts like soft spider silk. The song from his dream echoed faintly in his ears, a melody he couldn't quite remember, but couldn't forget either. He blinked the sleep from his eyes and sat up. Luma was already awake, fluttering near a patch of glowing flowers, her wings dusted with golden pollen. You looked peaceful, she said, like you were flying while you slept. I think I was, Nino murmured. In the dream, everything was glowing, and there were voices, not speaking, just singing, but the song was sad. Luma's wings slowed. Not all sad songs are sorrowful, she said. Some are just old. They spent the morning quietly. The forest around them had a hush, as if it too were remembering something. Even the birds, strange, feathered things with long tails and bright eyes, sang more softly than usual. The air had changed. It was cooler now, and the wind smelled different, not sharp or sour, but distant, like something far away drifting closer. By midday, they reached the river again, the one they had followed days before. Its water still sparkled, but the sound of it was lower, slower. Nino dipped his toes in and watched the ripples stretch across the surface like long, sleepy sighs. Across the river, smoke curled into the sky. Not black, not dangerous, just soft white smoke, rising in thin trails between the trees. Curious, Nino and Luma crossed the stepping stones and climbed the hill beyond. They found a small group of dinosaurs gathered around a ring of glowing stones. At the center of the ring sat a dinosaur with feathers like firelight, orange, red, and gold. She was old, not as ancient as the storyteller they'd met before, but with a quiet strength in her eyes. She was humming. The melody was low and steady, and the other dinosaurs around her swayed gently, their eyes closed. No one spoke. Even Luma didn't flutter or chirp. They simply stood, listening. When the humming stopped, the feathered dinosaur opened her eyes and looked directly at Nino. Come sit, she said. Nino stepped into the ring, and Luma landed on his back. You've heard the song before, the dinosaur said. I think so, Nino whispered. It's not just a song, she said. It's a memory of what was and a feeling of what will be. Some of us carry it in our bones. It grows louder the closer we come to a change. Nino swallowed. A change? Yes, she said gently. The world is always becoming something new. He looked around at the others. Some were young like him, others were larger, stronger, but all of them looked quiet, like they too had dreamed of falling stars and old songs. The feathered dinosaur looked up at the sky. Something is coming, she said. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. A shift in the wind, a note held too long. Nino felt that strange feeling again, a soft ache in his chest. Not fear, not yet, just knowing. The group dispersed slowly, each dinosaur stepping away from the ring with care, as if leaving behind something sacred. Nino and Luma stayed behind. Why us? Nino asked. Because you're listening, the feathered dinosaur said. Most don't. She stood and walked to the edge of the hill. Below them, the world stretched wide and shimmering, but even the sunlight looked softer now, as if the earth were holding its breath. I don't want it to change, Nino said. It already is, she replied. That's the nature of things. Nino was quiet. That night the sky clouded over. No stars, no moon, just a blanket of gray drifting above. The air was warm and still, too still. Luma curled beside Nino beneath a fern. Neither of them spoke. Then a sound. Not the song from the dreams. Not the hum of the earth. Something else. A low rumble. Distant, deep, like thunder from behind the mountains. Luma sat up. What was that? I don't know, Nino said, but it didn't sound like a memory. The next morning, they returned to the valley where dinosaurs had gathered. The ring of stones was cold now. The feathered dinosaur was gone. No one remained. Nino walked among the empty spots where they had sat, the scent of ash and old songs still lingering in the air. She said something was coming, he whispered. But not yet, Luma reminded him. Still, they both felt the space around them shift just a little, as if the world had turned 1 inch farther than before. They continued walking, following the river as it bent through meadows and past sleeping hills. Along the way, they saw others, herds of long-necked giants moving slower than before, small creatures darting under leaves with more caution. The birds had stopped singing. The wind carried with it a new silence, heavier than any before. As the sun dipped low behind the mountains, the sky turned strange. Not gold, not pink, but pale green and dull red. The clouds twisted slowly, quietly. No lightning, no rain, just a heavy stillness that pressed against Nino's skin. Luma landed close. Maybe we should rest. They found a quiet hollow, nestled between 3 mossy stones that stood like ancient guardians. Nino curled his tail around his body, and Luma tucked herself under his arm. Before sleep took them, Nino asked, "Do you think the earth knows what's coming?" "I think the earth always knows," Luma said, "but she tells us gently, through dreams, through songs." "Through stories?" Nino asked. "Yes," she whispered, and they closed their eyes as the wind began to change. Morning came slowly. It was not like the mornings before. The light that broke across the sky was pale and quiet, as though it too were unsure whether to rise. The mist was thicker, and the birds, what few remained, flew lower to the ground, their wings slicing through the silence with barely a sound. Nino awoke feeling different. Not sick, not tired, just heavy. His dreams had been filled with swirling colors and strange shapes, shadows that didn't move, skies that blinked like eyes. When he opened his eyes, he saw Luma already awake, perched on one of the mossy stones, her wings still and folded tight against her sides. "Did you dream?" Nino asked. She nodded slowly. It was quiet, but not peaceful. They didn't speak after that. Words felt too loud. Instead, they walked, through the forest that no longer hummed, through the tall grasses that no longer danced. Everything was still, too still. Along the edge of the river, they found footprints. Not just 1 or 2, but many, hundreds of them, all leading in the same direction. The earth had been pressed down by heavy steps, and the prints were filled with water, like tiny lakes holding the memory of motion. "Where did they go?" Nino whispered. Luma fluttered up for a better view, but the land stretched out empty. Hills, trees, rocks, but no dinosaurs. "They're moving," she said, "farther north. I don't know. Maybe they feel it too." They followed the footprints. The path grew steeper. The trees thinned. Rocks became sharper. The grass turned dry beneath their feet. Once they passed a nest full of broken eggs, the shells still warm, but no hatchlings in sight. Nino paused and touched one gently. "Do you think they left in time?" he asked. "I hope so," Luma answered. As they climbed higher, the sky changed again. It darkened, not like night, but like dusk stretched too long, smudging the day with gray. The sun was hidden behind a veil of strange clouds. They looked thick, not fluffy like before, but heavy, low, and wide, as though the sky were wearing a mask. Then the air shifted. Nino froze. A sound, soft but sharp, like something slicing through the sky. Luma darted up and hovered, eyes wide. "What is that?" They turned toward the horizon. In the farthest part of the sky, something was falling. A line of light, no fire, bright and fast, tearing through the clouds like a burning arrow. It grew larger with each breath, brighter than the sun, trailing flames and smoke. The ground beneath Nino's feet trembled ever so slightly, not enough to knock him off balance, but enough to make his heart stutter. "It's coming this way?" Luma said, her voice barely audible over the wind that had suddenly begun to howl. The fire grew. And then, silence. For one heartbeat, everything stopped. The air, the wind, the trembling, all paused. Then came the sound. A thunder unlike anything they had ever known. Not a boom, not a crash, but a roar. A roar so wide and deep that it didn't just echo, it pressed into their bones. The sky turned white, then red, then dark again. The fireball disappeared behind the mountains. Then the earth heaved. The ground jumped beneath Nino and threw him sideways. Trees cracked and fell, rocks rolled like marbles, birds screamed into the sky, and the river surged like it had been struck by a giant hand. Dust rose in thick waves, darkening the air until everything turned the color of smoke. Nino clung to the earth, his claws buried in the dirt. Luma wrapped her wings around him. Neither spoke. There was no room for words. The shaking slowed, but didn't stop. The ground twitched like a creature breathing too fast. The sky was no longer a sky, it was a swirling sea of ash and flame. After a long time, the world grew still again. Not quiet, not peaceful, just still. They waited. Luma was the first to move, fluttering up through the haze. She coughed and dipped back down. "I can't see," she whispered. Nino stood slowly. Everything was covered in ash, gray and soft, like snow made of smoke. He took a step. It puffed beneath his feet and stuck to his legs. The forest behind them was gone. No trees, no colors, just broken trunks and scorched earth. The river still moved, but sluggishly, full of soot and leaves. The air smelled of burning stars and bitter stone. "What happened?" Nino asked, even though he already knew. Luma didn't answer. They walked. Everywhere they went, they found silence. Creatures had fled. Trees had fallen. The once songful earth now whispered in a language of ash and shadow. As they climbed another hill, they saw it. The place where the fire had fallen. The mountain was gone. In its place was a wide, deep wound in the earth, glowing faintly orange. Smoke still poured from the center, rising in twisting columns. Around the edges, everything was burned flat. The sky above it glowed dull red, the clouds moving in strange, spiraling patterns. Nino stared. "It came from the stars." "Yes," Luma said, "but it didn't come to sing. It had come to change." They didn't stay long. That night, they slept in the hollow of a fallen tree. The stars were gone, hidden behind clouds of dust. The moon did not rise. The only light came from the glow on the horizon and the slow flicker of falling ash. As they lay together, Nino asked, "Is this the end?" Luma was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "No, but it's the part of the story when everything changes." And above them, the world continued to spin, wrapped in fire and silence. The days that followed were unlike any Nino had ever known. Each morning came later, the light dimmer, weaker, as if the sun itself were tired. The sky was no longer blue, but a dull gray tinged with brown. Clouds of ash drifted like lazy ghosts, casting long shadows, even at midday. The warmth that once danced on Nino's skin had faded, replaced by a cold that crept in slowly, quietly, like a secret. He and Luma wandered through a world that felt unfamiliar. The trees they had once climbed were gone or blackened. The grass no longer whispered beneath their feet. The rivers ran thicker now, muddied and sluggish, as if too sad to sparkle. Food became harder to find. The berries had withered. The leaves had curled inward, dry and crumbling. Small creatures they once saw darting between rocks and bushes had vanished. The world, once alive with songs and motion, was falling into a slow, aching silence. Nino's stomach growled as he searched beneath a fallen log. He found a handful of mushrooms, but their colors were pale and their smell strange. "Are they safe?" he asked. Luma fluttered down and sniffed. "Not these." They moved on. Some days they walked without speaking. Words felt too big, too loud in this quiet world, but even in the silence they stayed close. Luma's wings brushing gently against Nino's neck and Nino's footsteps steady beside her, no matter how tired he grew. One evening, they came across a small clearing where the ash hadn't fallen so thick. A few green shoots poked up from the ground, frail, brave little things. Nino lay beside them, staring at the sky through bare branches. "Do you think the world is sick?" he asked. Luma rested near his shoulder. "I think the world is grieving." "For what?" "For what it lost. For what it's losing." The wind stirred the ash into swirls, and for a moment it looked like snow. But it carried no joy. They moved east, following whispers, faint tracks, broken branches, a sense that others might have gone that way. Nino's legs ached, his back hurt, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. One morning, they found what remained of a herd. Dozens of dinosaurs stood in a wide, sunken valley. Some were lying down, some stood motionless. Many were thin, their ribs showing through rough skin. None of them spoke. The silence was heavy. Luma flew ahead, circling once before returning to Nino's side. "They're waiting," she said. For what? He whispered. For something better, or something final. Nino walked among them. A baby dinosaur looked up at him with sunken eyes, too weak to stand. Its mother lowered her head and nuzzled the child gently. She didn't cry. There were no tears left. The air smelled of dust and breath. The sun, dim behind the ash, cast long, thin shadows. Nino felt each heartbeat like a drum in his chest. Slow. Real. He found a spot beside a boulder and sat down. I thought we had forever, he said. No one has forever, Luma replied. But we have now. Is now enough? It has to be. They stayed with the herd that night, sharing warmth. A few of the dinosaurs whispered stories, old ones, passed down from those who had come before. Tales of bright skies and green forests, of lakes that sang and mountains that glowed. Nino listened, eyes wide, heart aching. He remembered the storyteller with the feathered back and the ancient dinosaur with eyes like deep lakes. He remembered how they spoke of change, not as a threat but as a rhythm, like a song with many verses. But this verse hurt. The next morning, the ground trembled again. Not as fiercely as before, but enough to wake them all. Birds cried out in panic. Trees shuddered. Rocks tumbled from nearby cliffs. The dinosaurs rose to their feet slowly. Some limped. Others leaned on each other. But they moved. Are they leaving? Nino asked. Luma nodded. They have to keep moving, even if they don't know where. Should we go too? Luma looked up at the thick sky. Yes, and so they went, step by step, across cracked earth and through valleys heavy with fog, over hills stripped of leaves and mountains crusted in ash. They came to a place where the earth had split, an enormous canyon, wide and deep like a scar carved into the world. Steam rose from the crack, and strange lights flickered far below. Nino stood at the edge, staring down. It feels like the earth is trying to breathe, he said. Or whisper something, Luma added. A single flower grew at the edge of the canyon. Small, blue, fragile. Nino knelt beside it and touched a petal gently. It didn't wilt. It didn't fall. It's still trying, he said softly. So should we, Luma replied. They moved on. Nights grew colder. Stars returned slowly, faint behind the haze. When Nino looked up, he saw new patterns in the sky, constellations that hadn't been there before. Or maybe they had, and he had only now learned how to see them. One star, brighter than the rest, flickered red. Luma watched it too. Do you think that's where it came from? Nino asked. The fire? Yes. Maybe, she said. Or maybe it's where we'll go next. They didn't speak again that night. The world had changed, and so had they. In the days that followed, the wind grew colder. Not the playful wind of their early adventures, the one that rustled leaves and tugged at Luma's wings. This wind was quiet and sharp, slipping through the trees like a sigh. It carried the scent of stone and ice, and sometimes something stranger, a smell Nino had never known. A smell like endings. The sky remained gray. Every morning, the sun pushed through the clouds with a little less light, a little less warmth. At night, stars blinked like old lanterns, their glow faded by the haze of ash that never fully cleared. Still, Nino and Luma walked. They passed through forests turned to skeletons, bare trunks blackened by flame, branches stretching like empty arms toward the sky. No birds, no chirps, only the crunch of ash beneath Nino's feet and the soft rustle of Luma gliding from one low branch to another. They stopped speaking often now, their words saved for things that mattered. One morning, as the sky brightened slightly, they came across a stream. It trickled slowly, cutting through the land with quiet determination. The water was clear in some places, cloudy in others, and it carried small fragments of leaves and bark. Nino knelt beside it and drank. The water tasted different, like earth and memory. But it was enough. Luma fluttered down beside him. We're not the only ones still moving. Across the stream, a group of dinosaurs emerged from the mist, tall ones with long tails, mothers carrying little ones on their backs, slow ones dragging their heavy feet. Their eyes were tired, their steps uncertain, but they walked with purpose. Where are they going? Nino asked. Maybe they don't know, Luma answered. Maybe it's not about the where anymore. Maybe it's about the moving. They followed behind. For 2 days, they traveled in silence with the group. No one spoke, but there was comfort in company. The rhythm of many feet, the soft breathing of living beings, the occasional nuzzle between a parent and child, it all felt like a heartbeat, faint but steady. Nino found himself walking beside a young dinosaur, not much older than he had been when he first hatched. She had bright eyes and a limp in her step. She didn't speak, but she smiled. At night, the group rested in tight circles, sharing warmth. The little one curled close to Nino without asking, and he draped his tail gently around her. Luma nestled in the crook of his neck. In sleep, Nino dreamed of the beginning again, of the egg, the lake, the blue sky. But this time, the sky was cracked, and the lake boiled quietly. Still, something green grew beside it. A sprout. Just one. When he woke, he carried the image with him like a treasure. The herd moved toward the mountains. The path was steep, and many stumbled. Nino helped where he could, pushing gently with his head, guiding little ones around loose stones. Luma flew ahead to scout, returning with soft chirps that meant it was safe to go on. As they climbed, the air thinned. Breaths came slower. The clouds grew heavier. And then, on the third morning atop the ridge, they saw it. A valley untouched, wide and deep, cradled between snow-dusted peaks, the land below was green. Not bright, wild green, but soft, stubborn green. Mosses clung to rocks. Ferns peeked from shadows. A stream wound through it like silver thread, and the sky above was clearer than any they'd seen in many days. Gasps rose from the herd. Some wept without sound. Others simply stood, as if they could not believe what they saw. Nino's eyes filled. Luma pressed close. "It survived," he whispered. "Something always does," she said. They descended carefully. Every step down felt like a step toward something forgotten. As they reached the valley floor, the grass bent beneath their feet like it remembered them. They moved slowly, gently. No one rushed. It was as if they were afraid to break it. But the land did not break. It accepted them. That night, they slept under stars that glowed brighter. The wind still whispered, but its voice was softer now, less like sorrow and more like song. In the days that followed, the dinosaurs began to build again, not with tools or nests or things made of stone, but with presence. They stayed close. They shared food when they found it. They sang again, not the old songs, but new ones made from memory and hope. Nino sat beneath a tree with wide green leaves, watching as the young ones played near the stream. Their laughter was quieter than the laughter of long ago, but it was laughter still. Luma landed on his snout. "We found something," she said. Nino nodded. "A place. A beginning." He looked up at the sky. "I wonder how many of us are left." Luma was silent. Nino didn't ask again. He knew some were gone. Many, perhaps, more than he could imagine. But not all. Not him. Not Luma. Not the herd in the valley. And if something remained, then the story was not over. That night, he told a story to the little ones, about the lake where he hatched, about his first roar, about the old dinosaur who spoke of songs. They listened with wide eyes and quiet hearts. When he finished, one asked, "Will there be more stories?" Nino smiled. "Yes," he said, "as long as we keep moving, as long as we keep listening." And under the stars, in the hush between one age and another, a new song began. The days in the valley passed gently, like feathers drifting through the air. Morning light crept slowly across the hills, soft and pale, but warm enough to stir the moss awake. The air held the scent of damp earth and something sweeter, new life, perhaps, or a memory blooming again. Nino woke each day with the sound of slow-moving water in his ears and the rustle of leaves overhead. It was a different world than the one he had hatched into, quieter, softer, but still alive. In the valley, things began to grow. Not quickly, not loudly, but with quiet determination. Tiny green sprouts pushed through ash-covered soil. Flowers with trembling petals peeked from the shade of old rocks. Even the trees, though smaller than before, began to stretch upward, their thin branches reaching for the dim sunlight. And among all this, the dinosaurs lived. They did not roar or race like they once had. Their play was slower now. Careful. The little ones chased shadows instead of birds, and the older ones moved with reverence, as if every step pressed a promise into the ground. We are still here. Nino became something of a storyteller. Each evening, as the stars blinked through the haze above, the young ones gathered around him. He told them about the Great Lake, the whispering forest, the sky that used to shine like silver. He told them about the fire that fell from the heavens and the old dinosaurs who knew things without words. He told them about Luma, of course, who always perched nearby, adding her chirps and flutters in the quiet spaces between his sentences. But one night, after he finished a tale about the day the sky cracked open, one of the young ones asked a question. "Will the fire come again?" The others turned silent. Nino looked up at the sky. The clouds had thinned lately, revealing patches of deep blue. The stars no longer flickered as if afraid. But that question still hung heavy in the air. "I don't know," he said truthfully. "Then how do we stay safe?" the little one asked. "We remember," Nino replied after a pause. "We remember the signs, the wind, the silence, the song of the earth. We listen." The young ones nodded solemnly, though they did not yet fully understand. But understanding, Nino had learned, was not always needed right away. Sometimes it grew in its own time, like the moss under the stones. The seasons shifted slowly in the valley. Winds carried cooler air down from the mountains. The green grasses faded to a dusky gold. The stream grew quieter, but never stopped. Luma noticed that the birds had begun to return, small flocks at first, flying in cautious spirals overhead. Their wings shimmered in the pale sun like folded rainbows. She told Nino that the world beyond the valley might be stirring too. They climbed to the ridge one morning to see for themselves. From above, the valley looked like a cradle, soft and held, cupped gently between the jagged arms of the mountains. Beyond, the land stretched far and wide. Much of it was still gray, still broken, but here and there were signs, dots of green, ribbons of blue, little trails of animals moving through the dust. "It's healing," Luma whispered. Nino nodded. "So slowly. But it's trying." They stood in silence, the wind brushing over them like a sigh. Nino thought about all they had lost. He thought of the berry bush where he and Luma had first laughed, the trees that whispered secrets when the stars came out, the soft glow of the old dinosaur's eyes, the songs that hummed through the ground, keeping time with the breath of the earth. Gone now? Or sleeping? He didn't cry. The tears had come long ago and dried with the ash. Instead, he pressed a claw to the dirt at his feet and whispered, "Thank you." Luma landed beside him. "What will we do next?" Nino looked out at the broken, breathing world. "We'll leave the valley. Not forever. Just far enough to listen again, to learn what changed, to find what's still growing." "And the others? They'll stay. The valley is safe. It needs them. And maybe they need it too." That night, Nino told one last story around the fire. He told them about journeys, about how not all movement is running and not all stillness is sleep. He told them that one day they too would feel the tug in their bones, the pull to wander, to wonder. He said that listening was the first step in any great adventure. Before dawn, Nino and Luma left. The herd did not try to stop them. A few walked with them to the edge of the valley. The young one who had asked about the fire placed a pebble in Nino's hand, a smooth green stone shaped like a tear. "For remembering," she said. And then they were gone, stepping quietly into the wild world once more. The land was no easier than before. The winds still carried ash, the trees were still few. But the world no longer felt like it was ending. It felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something new. As Nino and Luma walked, they saw things. A cracked egg with a tiny footprint beside it, a pond reflecting the sky, a single flower growing in the hollow of a fallen horn. Each thing whispered the same truth. Life was still here, and it was not finished. The road beyond the valley was quiet, but it was not empty. Nino and Luma walked through fields of stone and dust, past bones half buried in ash, past trees that had fallen and never stood again. And yet, beneath all that silence, something moved. Small things, brave things, life refusing to sleep forever. There were beetles now, tiny and bright, crawling between cracks in the rocks. Mushrooms, too, soft and white, blooming on the backs of fallen logs. In the distance, flocks of small birds circled above dry canyons, their wings slicing through the wind like silver blades. Nino saw all of it, not with the same wide wonder as before. His eyes were older now, but with every step he felt a quiet sense of hope, like a seed curling open beneath the surface. One evening, after a long day of climbing through a ravine choked with dust, Nino and Luma came upon a tree. It was the first full tree they had seen outside the valley. Its trunk was thick, bark dark and cracked but alive. Its branches stretched toward the sky, leaves sparse but strong, and at its roots sat a nest, delicate, made of dry grass and threads of moss. In the nest was an egg, a single speckled egg, nestled carefully between two smooth stones. Nino approached slowly. Luma hovered just above the nest, her eyes wide. "It's warm," she said. Nino sat beside it. He didn't touch the egg, only watched it. The air around the nest was still. The tree creaked in the wind, but did not bend. "Someone left it here," he whispered. "Or someone's watching it," Luma replied, her voice low. They stayed there for a long while, watching, breathing. As the stars appeared one by one, Luma curled into the crook of Nino's neck and fell asleep. Nino stayed awake, eyes on the egg, heart full of questions. Who had laid it? Would it hatch? Was this the beginning again? In the early morning, as fog drifted like silk across the ground, Nino heard a sound. Crack. He sat up straight. Luma jolted awake. Crack. The egg wobbled. Crack. Crack. A small piece of shell broke away, then another, and then a nose, tiny, wet, and trembling. Then an eye, blinking slowly at the rising sun. Then a small head, covered in soft feathers the color of soot and silver. The hatchling made a sound, not a chirp, not a cry, a hum, a soft, trembling hum that made the tree leaves rustle gently as if they remembered a song from long ago. Nino did not move. He only watched. The hatchling stretched, legs still weak, wings not yet ready. It blinked again, then turned its head toward Nino. Their eyes met. It tilted its head, curious, unafraid. "Hello," Nino said quietly. The hatchling chirped in return. "Do you think it knows?" Luma whispered. "About what came before?" "No," Nino said, "but maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe it's enough that it's here now." They stayed with the hatchling that day, just guarding it as the sun rose and fell. Nino found small berries nearby, and Luma caught insects in the warm air. The little creature ate carefully, slowly learning how to move, how to listen, how to rest. By nightfall, it nestled into Nino's side, breath soft and steady. It reminded him of himself, not in shape or color, but in spirit, new to the world, full of questions, carried by a wind older than memory. The next morning, they walked on. They couldn't stay by the tree last. The hatchling, full of surprising strength, followed them without needing to be asked. It chirped and peeped and stumbled and ran all in one breath. It was faster than expected. Eager. Luma gave it a name. "Miro," she said. "Why that?" Nino asked. "It means spark in the old songs." Miro chirped as if proud. For days the three of them wandered. Miro learned quickly. He copied Nino's steps, tried to mimic Luma's flight, though his wings still fluttered clumsily. He laughed often, strange little squeaks that filled the empty lands with something warm. They came across other signs of life. A stream trickling through glassy rocks, its banks lined with green. A family of horned dinosaurs moving slowly across a hillside, their young bounding beside them. A patch of flowers growing in the shape of a spiral, each petal a different color. And in every place, Nino saw something he hadn't felt in many weeks. Light. Not the sun's light, though that too had returned more each day, but a light inside things. A kind of quiet magic that shimmered at the edges of the world, where sorrow once lived. A promise. One evening, as they sat on the edge of a cliff overlooking a field of sleeping trees, Miro curled into a ball and yawned. Luma landed beside Nino. "We've come far," she said. "Yes," he replied. "Do you think there are others like Miro?" "I hope so." Luma looked up at the sky. The stars were brighter now. The air smelled of green things. Even the breeze carried a softness they hadn't felt in moons. "I think the world is singing again," she whispered. Nino listened. And in the rustle of the leaves, in the hum of the sleeping earth, in the gentle breath of the hatchling beside him, he heard it too. A song. Not the same as before, but new and full. The wind changed again. But this time, it did not carry ash or sorrow. It carried warmth. The kind that slipped through the grass like laughter. The kind that danced across the skin like a friendly whisper. It was the wind of growing things, of returning songs. Miro grew quickly under that wind. Each day his legs stretched longer, his steps stronger. He no longer stumbled, but ran in joyful loops around Nino, chasing his own shadow. His feathers darkened to a deep slate blue, and his eyes sparkled with light that hadn't been seen in a long time. He asked questions, so many questions. What is that cloud shaped like? Why do the stars come only at night? Did the earth always look like this? Nino answered what he could. When he didn't know, Luma would chirp and twist her wings and make up a story, just silly enough to make Miro giggle. Sometimes they let the questions hang in the air, unanswered, and simply listened to the wind reply with its long, patient breath. They wandered farther than Nino ever had before, through canyons carved by rivers long dried, across fields where stones were shaped like bones and flowers grew between them, soft and shy, over hills that still carried the scars of fire, but bloomed at the edges where green had returned. One morning, they found a lake. It was wide, still and perfect. The surface was glass, holding the sky like a mirror. Around it stood trees, real trees, tall and proud, their leaves whispering in the morning sun. Birds danced between their branches, calling out to one another with songs that twisted through the wind like old stories reborn. Miro ran straight to the water's edge and stared at his reflection. "Is that me?" he asked. "Yes," Nino said with a smile. "I look like you." "You do," Miro blinked, "but different too." "Different is good," said Luma. They drank from the lake. The water tasted cold and sweet like melted light. As they rested under the trees, more creatures emerged from the woods, some large, some small, all cautious, all quiet. They came not for fear, but for wonder. A slow, sleepy creature with a shell as wide as a boulder wandered by, blinking peacefully. A tall bird with ribbon-like feathers stepped delicately between roots. Two tiny four-legged creatures played among the ferns, their laughter high and sharp. All of them were new. Not like the dinosaurs Nino had known. Not exactly. They carried the shape of something old, but with a spirit that was beginning again. Nino watched them and said nothing. Inside, his heart beat like a drum from long ago, steady and slow, full of awe. That night, they camped beneath the trees. The stars came out thick and bright. Miro couldn't sleep. He stared at the sky, pointing to each cluster of light. "What are those?" he whispered. "Stories," Luma replied. "What kind of stories?" "Ones we haven't told yet," Nino said. Miro grew quiet. Then he said, "Will I get to tell stories too?" "Yes," Nino whispered. "Someday." The fire they built was small but warm. It crackled like laughter. The trees leaned in, their branches creaking gently, as if they too were listening. In the distance, something howled, not in fear, but in song. In the morning, they moved again, farther east now, toward the place where the sun rose bright and low over the plains. Miro liked to race the dawn, running until his feet ached and his breath came in bursts. Nino followed more slowly, Luma circling above them like a ribbon in the wind. They came across fossils buried halfway in the dirt. Miro tilted his head. "What are these?" "Old bones," Nino said. "Are they sleeping?" "No," Nino replied. "They were here before us, long before." "Were they like you?" "Yes." Miro was silent for a moment. "Why aren't they here anymore?" Nino didn't answer right away. He looked at the horizon, where the sky met the hills, where the light stretched soft and long. "They had their time," he said, "like a season, like a song." "Do we have time?" "We do now." They buried the bones gently, covering them with leaves and small stones. Miro placed a feather on top, one of his own, fallen during the night, a gift for the past. As they walked on, the world seemed to open wider. The colors deepened. The wind carried new scents. Flowers blooming for the first time, soil warming in the sun, creatures waking from long slumber. The earth was not what it once was, but it was alive. And the sky? Oh, the sky. One evening, as they climbed to the top of a tall hill, they saw it in full. A wide, endless canvas painted in lavender, rose, and gold. The clouds glowed at the edges. The wind stood still. Miro sat between Nino and Luma, staring in silence. "It looks like the beginning," he said. "It is," Nino replied. Luma added, "It always is." Below them, the land stretched on, rolling fields, rivers catching the last light, mountains in the far distance like sleeping giants. Somewhere out there, life was stirring, footsteps waiting to be placed, songs waiting to be sung. The three sat there until the stars returned, and in that stillness, wrapped in wind and wonder, they understood something unspoken. The story was no longer about what was lost. It was about what remained. The wind was calm. Not quiet, not still, but calm, like a gentle breath at the end of a long, deep sleep. It swept across the plains, through the trees, and over the hills like a lullaby, brushing gently against Nino, Luma, and Miro as they stood at the top of the ridge, watching the world stretch out before them. Below, the land shimmered with early morning dew. Every blade of grass, every petal, every new leaf seemed to glisten, as though the earth had been weeping and had finally stopped. The sky above them was vast and blue, truly blue, for the first time in many, many moons. Not hidden behind ash, not dimmed by sorrow, just blue, like the day Nino had first opened his eyes beside a quiet lake. Miro ran ahead, wings fluttering, feet kicking up dust that sparkled in the sunlight. "Come on," he shouted. "Let's see what's down there." Nino smiled. His body was older now. He moved slower, but his heart somehow felt lighter than ever before. Luma landed on his shoulder. "He's growing," she said. Nino nodded. "Faster than we ever did." "That's how it is," she said. "The ones who come after, they rise from what we leave behind." They walked down the slope together, the grass brushing against their legs. Miro danced among the flowers, chasing beetles, mimicking bird songs, calling out the names he made up for rocks and clouds and colors the world had never seen before. The valley they entered was full of sound, not the noise of crowds, but the music of life returning. The chirp of insects, the rustle of trees, the soft drip of water from leaf to leaf, and laughter, small and new and true. They stopped at a stream to drink. The water was cool and clear, moving fast over smooth stones. Miro splashed in it, kicking waves and pretending to fly. "I want to go everywhere," he said. "I want to see every tree and every star and every lake and every kind of dinosaur ever." Nino chuckled. "That might take a while." "That's okay," Miro grinned. "I think we have time." They rested beneath a tall tree with bark the color of charcoal and leaves that flickered between gold and green when the light touched them. As they lay in the shade, Luma began to hum, an old song, one Nino hadn't heard in what felt like a lifetime. The tune was slow and soft, like a breeze curled inside a memory. "Where did you learn that?" Miro asked. "It was sung to us," Luma said. "By who?" "By the earth." Miro blinked, unsure whether it was a story or the truth, but he didn't ask again. He simply listened. As night came, they built a small fire from dry twigs and fallen leaves. The flames crackled gently, throwing shadows across the nearby stones. Miro curled up beside Nino, his breathing slow, his dreams already beginning. Luma rested on a branch above, wings tucked tight. Nino gazed into the fire. He thought of all that had been, the lake where he hatched, the ancient ones who told stories with their eyes, the fire in the sky, the ash, the silence, the valley of survivors. And now, this, a world that hadn't ended, a world that had turned the page. He looked at Miro, who stirred slightly, mumbling a wordless melody in his sleep. Then he looked up at the sky. The stars were thick and glowing. The constellations had shifted slightly, new patterns forming from old pieces. Nino didn't know their names, but he didn't need to. Not anymore. The Earth was writing a new chapter. And he, Luma, and Miro, they were part of the beginning. In the stillness, a breeze passed through the grass, soft as a whisper. It carried no warning, no sadness, only the steady rhythm of life continuing, of wings flapping, of hearts beating, of footsteps being placed gently, one after another, into a world that remembered everything, but held no grudge, a world that forgave and kept singing forever.